Modularism, the blueprint for a consensual state. Modularism is an apolitical re-envisioning of the state and how government services should be managed. No taxation without representation or consent is its core guiding principle, believing in the intrinsic human right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, without ideological impediment, and with the implementation of the consensual tax system. Political/economic experimentation with constitutional oversight is to be encouraged through the greater empowerment of local/municipal governments and the formation of pseudo-governmental organizations (PGOs). The purpose of these PGOs would be to internally allocate resources for social programs, as well as protecting the rights and civil liberties of its members, like a government typically would, removing any need for large-scale, collective, non-consensual wealth redistribution. This would create new markets that improve the efficiency of the services that PGO members would be willing to pay taxes towards. People would voluntarily choose to pay taxes to a PGO due to their comparative ease of use and the sheer amount of choices that would be available under modularism. Socialists could have their own internal services and outward-facing public programs, while libertarians could streamline and minimize what little interactions with outside governing bodies is required of them. Any individual should be allowed to opt out entirely if they choose, but doing so should also result in the loss of some equal legal protections as a citizen. If implemented correctly, these PGOs could create an effective political separation between fundamentally opposing perspectives without requiring any physical separation. This could hopefully serve to nullify most toxic ideological disagreements over political issues, both at a governmental and individual level. We do not need to draw lines in the sand or on a map and physically divide our nation S. These lines should instead be drawn at our money and at our consent to give it willingly. In other words, a libertarian should not be forced against their will to pay into a socialist system, and a socialist should not be disallowed from collectivizing and redistributing their wealth voluntarily. Most former government programs and services would become managed partially by municipalities, but mostly by PGOs. The PGOs would essentially function like many small governments that all share the same space, and would be responsible to allocate consensually raised tax money for public services or social programs that have been democratically agreed on by its members. These members would voluntarily choose their PGO according to ideological preference and perceived benefit, creating markets to serve political needs. This would in turn create a sense of competition among the PGOs over who could best meet the needs of the people, as well as various ideological niches, thus improving the overall quality/efficiency of these services and making them actually competitive with one another. The federal and regional governments should be small and very limited, interfering with PGOs and municipalities as little as possible in their oversight, playing an almost insignificant role in the economy and the lives of its citizens, and only imposing the most necessary laws and regulations to create and maintain a good quality of life for the citizens. Effective oversight of the PGOs would be crucial to any long-term success as well. Audits would have to be performed routinely to ensure tax money is being allocated appropriately, and that contractual agreements between PGOs and their members are being honored. Every level of governance under modularism, federal, regional, local, and all PGOs, should all have an equal authority to audit and investigate one another under the oversight of a decentralized regulatory body made up of unbiased and nonpartisan equal representatives from each level of governance. For example, one representative for the federal government and one representative for every regional government, local government, and PGO. The federal government should be minimalistic, only needing a small amount of tax money to maintain federal infrastructure and a defensive military. There should be no public services funded at the federal level, and thus should only employ a small number of elected officials and custodial servicemen to run the federal government. The main purpose of the federal government should be the oversight of regulatory bodies, ensuring they are fair and in the interests of their country's citizens, and the participation in international diplomacy. Taxes at the federal level should be collected either directly through individuals filing themselves or collectively by taxing the PGOs an annual bulk sum based on the population of the PGO and its gross annual income. Any individual's failure to pay federal taxes will result in only the loss of voting rights at the federal level. Provinces/states, or the regional governments, should be functionally similar to the federal government, but with more independent control over local laws, their enforcement, and the right to spend tax money on some civil projects, provided they are apolitical and indisputably within the interest of the general public. The main purpose of the regional government should be the maintenance of regional infrastructure, oversight of regional legal systems, enforcement of regional laws, and potentially the partial funding of regional services like education or healthcare, if it is democratically agreed on by residents. Taxes at the regional level should be collected either directly through individuals filing themselves or collectively by taxing the PGOs an annual bulk sum based on a democratically decided amount, differing from region to region. Any individual's failure to pay regional taxes would result in the loss of voting rights at the regional level, disqualification from any public services, including emergency services, tolled roads, ECT. Non-taxpayers will still have the right to access publicly funded services like these, but will be billed by mail if any are utilized. The municipal or local governments should have more political freedom to experiment ideologically than the federal or regional levels of government, being able to spend municipal tax money on public services, so long as its citizens democratically consent. The main purpose of the municipal government should be the maintenance of local infrastructure and enforcement of local laws, all with a focus on improving overall quality of life locally based on that community's cultural and ideological needs. Any social programs or public services funded at the municipal level should be ideologically neutral, non-threatening, or fully apolitical in nature. Taxes at the local level should be collected either directly through individuals filing themselves or collectively by taxing the PGOs an annual bulk sum based on a democratically decided amount, differing between municipalities. Any individual's failure to pay municipal taxes would result in the loss of voting rights, the disqualification from any public services, and legal repercussions up to and including the potential seizure of private property within a municipality's jurisdiction, depending on local laws and the prevailing political consensus. Pseudo-Governmental Organizations, or PGO, would act as a collection of many small governments mutually occupying one nation. Each PGO's focus or specialty would range greatly based on the clientele being catered to. At its simplest, a PGO would function similarly to an accounting firm, handling their members' taxes and ensuring their ability to vote at all levels of government. Any additional services a PGO could offer, like healthcare, education, welfare, pensions, would need to be democratically consented to by the members of that PGO. The right to move freely between PGOs, or exist without membership in one entirely, should not be financially or bureaucratically impeded on in any way. This would ensure market forces maintain the efficiency and quality of the PGOs, and that the leaders in our society see the value of maintaining and honoring the consent of individuals. If implemented correctly, these PGOs would lead to the creation of new markets based around providing better services, offering lower taxes, promoting charitable causes, as well as any other social, political, or commercial endeavor its members choose voluntarily to support. The PGOs would collect taxes directly from its members and divide it up accordingly based on an agreement between that PGO and each individual member. The PGOs would be obligated to pay all expected taxes on behalf of its members at all applicable levels of government to ensure its members' voting rights and legal protections, as well as the right to access regional or municipal services. Any individual's failure to pay taxes to their PGO will be in violation of a legally binding contract and could face legal consequences for violating that agreement. PGO models. A standard PGO would function exactly like a small government staffed mostly by elected officials, or similar to a modern political party. These political parties would likely become the first PGOs, as the already existing infrastructure of the party system could transition easier than creating a new political infrastructure from scratch. Already having their own ideological beliefs and followings, the current parties could almost immediately begin implementing their political goals among their members. These standard PGOs would likely become the largest and most well-organized PGOs and would likely consist of moderate ideological niches such as mainstream liberalism and conservatism. A corporate PGO would function essentially like a business or corporation, possibly even offering products instead of services. If its members are formally taxed, they should be entitled to some level of democratic involvement in regards to how that money is spent as would be expected in any PGO. If a corporate PGO decides to operate more minimalistically, it may possibly choose to offer insurance plans instead of typical government services, but will still be required to come up with the expected annual tax amount, regardless of how they choose to collect that money internally. These corporate PGOs would likely consist of corporations and financial institutions that transition to the PGO model, likely maintaining their previous business operations and overall corporate structure. Most members of corporate PGOs would likely be ideologically libertarian or conservative, though the corporate model could prove effective for socialists and progressives as well. A communal PGO could be better defined as being location-based rather than following any specific model. It could resemble a traditional government/political party, a corporation, a suburban-style gated community, or an ideologically motivated commune. It can even exist simultaneously as a municipality with both members outside of its municipal jurisdiction and non-members within that jurisdiction. Communal PGOs would probably be few and far between, and would most likely consist of ideological extremes seeking to isolate themselves from the outside world. With proper oversight, these communal PGOs would be given economic freedom to experiment politically and ideologically in a vacuum without fear of negatively affecting other individuals or the greater economy as a whole, and could also serve as some kind of pressure release valve for the far left and far right, both of whom feel equally disenfranchised by our current society. As a result of this disenfranchisement, radicals like this will actively work against the society's interests until that society changes to work in the interests of those radicals. The communal PGO model could effectively help quarantine these types of fringe, but otherwise harmless radical groups, allowing safe and constructive ways for them to implement their ideological beliefs. Separating these problem groups from one another and giving them space to live without ideological impediment would better enable coexistence and lead to the overall refinement of our ideologically diverse civilization. Modularism defines capitalism as an extension of nature, a voluntary transaction between two or more consenting participants in which all parties' rights to private property are acknowledged and respected. Modularism views capitalism as a natural force that must be embraced by society, yet superseded by the rule of law to ensure its maximum benefit for human life. In nature, work is essential for survival. Hunting for food, building a shelter, fending off predators, and spending most of your time and energy doing these activities with little rest. A currency is created to act as a natural placeholder for intrinsic monetary value, which symbolically represents an individual's labor in acquiring it. This allowed more leisure time in comparison to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and the work itself became more abstract, allowing for artistic expression and technological progress. The simplest example of capitalism as nature is the barter system. For example, one farmer that grows wheat could trade extra to another farmer that grows carrots. This transaction is voluntary and consensual, but creates another problem. What if one party does not want the specific goods of another? The answer is the implementation of a currency, which symbolically represents an individual's labor in acquiring it. That being said, the hypothesis that barter lead to the creation of currency itself is highly contested by the idea that governments issuing debt actually served a much more significant role in the creation of money. However, regardless of if the first currency was physical gold or an immaterial credit system, this does not change the nature of that placeholder or its intrinsic value. To survive in nature requires hard work, labor, or you will succumb to nature and perish. This natural phenomenon is exemplified by the process of acquiring capital. If you don't work, you will starve. This dichotomy is not a human-imposed cruelty, but a natural one, and there is only so much circumventing of the natural order that humanity can achieve before our hubris catches up with us. Capitalism is a man-made extension of nature that should be viewed similarly to most other natural processes in regards to the respect it demands, its moral authority, and the social need for protection from it. Like a volcano, capitalism's potential has as much power to create as it does to destroy. It all depends on your perspective, intelligence, and how close you allow yourself to be. Modularism seeks to utilize this natural force in the empowerment of local communities and individuals by reducing business regulations to a bare minimum and mitigating any natural negative effects of unregulated capitalism with decentralized regulatory oversight from the PGOs. As an abstract example of why protection is necessary, a hike through the woods is a great way to benefit from nature, but getting attacked by a bear is not. This analogy, I think, symbolically highlights one of many core disagreements between the modern left and right. Parts of the right lean towards metaphorically throwing them to the wolves, while parts of the left will delusionally fear the bear and reject nature entirely. Of course, both extreme conclusions are wrong. Saying he should have known better and come more prepared doesn't help if the victim is an inexperienced tourist, and burning down the forest so no human being may ever be harmed there again is even worse. A poor man is no more able to defend himself in court against a rich man than he is a jaguar in the jungle. It is only through this natural lens of predation that we can see where capitalism as an ideology faults and protection becomes necessary. That being said, there is absolutely a certain onus each individual has to protect themselves that cannot be downplayed or overlooked. In other words, if you are of sound mind and knowingly walk into the woods unarmed and unconcerned of wolves, bears, and jaguars, you assume that risk entirely on your own and must take full responsibility for your willing actions. This is capitalism, and it is nature, and it is only the fiction we impose over nature that perpetuates this shared delusion of fairness and equality. This socially conditioned delusion is largely necessary for society to minimize naturally occurring exploitation and to ensure some quality of life for individuals. Our shared fiction should reflect a more accurate understanding of the natural world and not seek to defy it, opting instead to go with the grain of human nature rather than against it. A top-down command economy is functioning under the delusion that it can control every natural process that it's attempting to manage, and surely it cannot. While at the same time, to remove any and all sense of imposed fiction over society would result in anarcho-primitivism and basically leave people to the whim of all potential, exploitative natural processes. One could argue that this is right because it is natural, ignoring that there are others equally as willing to fight for their security as you are to maintain your freedom. 10,000 years of cultural evolution cannot be allowed to culminate in the self-destruction of organized human society, nor should it be allowed to slip into a delusional tyranny that forces cognitive dissonance on the masses. The only solution is to fix the system we have and not to discard the highly effective fictional tools humanity has developed over the centuries, but also not to become too reliant on those tools, seeing them as necessary shared delusions that need exposure to the reality of natural market forces, ensuring their efficiency and effectiveness. The goal of modularism is to maximize both the economic and personal freedom of individuals, while mobilizing and utilizing local populations to better protect the interests of their own communities. This system does not attempt to redistribute wealth at the federal or regional levels. Any wealth redistribution allowed within modularism is only to be done by PGOs and municipalities and must be consensual. This ideology is not meant to serve the culture war or further the dividing of our society along ideological lines, but rather to encourage a total unification across the political spectrum. This idea is not about creating government-funded safety nets to be abused, but instead to help build more efficient, consensually funded community safety nets that have to prove their worth within a market. Modularism is not a revolutionary idea. It is a thought experiment meant to promote peace through unity and theorize a potential solution to the biggest problem in the modern world, partisanism. If you read this to the end, thank you. Even if you disagree with my idea or question the potential reach it could ever have, I felt compelled to try and put it in writing. Hopefully, what I'm saying makes sense. If not, then maybe I might inspire someone else to try and come up with some kind of solution. Maybe somebody smarter than me, a better writer, with a broader understanding of the issues. There are solutions out there to the world's political problems, and we could find them. You could find them. I would like to encourage anybody that's taken the time to read this to start thinking about solutions themselves. Theorize and discuss online. Don't be gaslit into thinking people are too far gone or that ideas can't change the world.